So that's when I started the fake Driscoll Twitter, and just kind of would say stuff in Mark's voice to like just as a parody. And within like 12 hours of starting that account, I got an email from Mars Hill where it had all this legalese, and they were saying that it was like, you're allowed to have a Twitter account, but you need to make abundantly clear that this is a parody and it's not really Mark. I go, I don't know how much clearer it could be than being called fake Driscoll. And so I made that my bio. Like, Mars Hill said to tell you that this is a parody account.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
And I'm Casey.
And I'm coming to you from a space above a garage. I'm on vacation, and I'm squeezing this in, and my computer's being a little weird, so I don't know if I'm going to have any like audio issues on this because I can't get to my audio settings. So if it ends up coming through weird on the recording, I guess I'll just deal with it, and Casey gets to have fun trying to fix it.
I didn't realize the Hampton Inn had like a garage attic apartment.
Yeah. Cool. No, we're staying with family, and it's my wife's cousin's letting us use his space. He's got this huge room up here. It's really cool. It's a super dope spot to do my things. You can see probably all of his cool I'm good at stuff equipment behind me.
Yeah, like lots of music equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
There's no turd pipe. Like right over your head this time?
Nope. We're not coming from my garage right next to where all my plumbing connects to. So that's fun. Dude, so coming through. All right. So I'm in North Carolina. Obviously, that's far from Massachusetts. We drove with our kids in a van, and they were surprisingly great. I was a little nervous about how that was going to all play out. Kids were awesome. Barely complained. I mean, they asked how much longer, about every hour or less, but other than that, it was fine. And we had pretty smooth sailing, going through Connecticut, New York, Maryland, West Virginia. And then we got to Virginia, and it was just traffic. I mean, we sat in like at least 2 hours of traffic just in the state of Virginia. And it was all related to car accidents. Now, we lived in Virginia, Casey, and I remember talking about, I had forgotten that we talked about this, but now I very much remember talking about how bad Virginia drives.
Yeah, I feel like people say that everywhere.
That's true. They do, but I'm going to go ahead and believe that it's true after my experience, my anecdotal experience, because we're not in Virginia for that long. In 6 car accidents is why we were stuck in traffic. Now, I hope nobody died.
Was it raining or anything?
Nope. No, it was fine. Weather was fine. And
I do like how in the South, like rain is a reason why you might get into a wreck.
Yeah, I know.
Like rain, it rained. Come on.
How are we ever going to get where we need to go? It's raining, guys. We need to stay home. And on one of them, dude, it was like, you see the line turn red. You got Google Maps up. Shout out to Google. They sponsor the podcast. And you see that long red line, and it's like you scroll up and it shows you where the car accident was. And while we're just watching that, it's just like more accidents popping up because everyone just gotten the fucking fender benders or something. Like
because they're on their phone and then they rear end the person stopping in front of them.
It's so bad. We were in so much traffic. And
that's definitely how I'm going to die.
Yeah. And then we saw like a trailer flipped over on the side of the road that detached from somebody's truck. It's like, I don't know. Of course, like I said, I hope nobody died, but also if after that level of inconvenience for me, they kind of deserve it, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Right.
I mean,
dude, I almost witnessed a car wreck like that this week. I was coming back from, I don't know, Kansas City or something like that. And there's this person in front of me, and they were driving pretty fast. You know, it's speed limit 75. So everybody's doing like 80, 83, somewhere in there, right? And this person is in front of me going pretty fast. They had kind of weaved through traffic a little bit. And ahead of them is like an old Ford Ranger, and it's towing a trailer in the left lane doing like 60. I mean, this thing's like it's putting along. It's going very slow. I don't know why they're in the left lane. They don't have their flashes on or anything like that. And I'm following this guy and I'm watching him, and he's just like gaining on these people. Like, I mean, closing the distance quick. And I'm watching him. I'm like, is he just trying to like push them out of the way, or what is he doing? And then,
which is
you know, you have that
you have
that realization where you're like, he doesn't see that car. And all of a sudden, like, brakes locked up and the thing starts fishtailing and stuff like that. And I mean, you could see it for, you know, he had a good like 2 minutes of visibility on this thing before he got to it. He was for sure like buried in his phone or something like that. And
that's ridiculous.
Now, look, I'm not passing judgment on people who are buried in their phone, because I probably was at the time too. But
you had to look up your phone to see that.
Yeah, it's a skill. Like you gotta work to get better at it, man.
Yeah, that's a good position to take on using phones.
I think you should never use your phone while you're driving until you're over the age of 30.
Yeah,
and then it's okay.
I don't know if the statistics would show that, but you know, we could look into it.
Well, I guess if just the liberal media.
Yeah, looking at it, the lamestream media has a lot to say about looking at your phone while driving. Dude, okay, a couple of things to note that I found notable on my drive here. So, with some of the car accidents, we jumped off the highway. It kind of like rerouted us to like avoid them. And I saw kind of for the first time, you had called this out before when you're like talking about like these areas that have maybe the local community is struggling financially, but the church in the area is certainly not. And I saw that. I mean, dude, one of the roads we went down, I was like, okay. It was just like, look, and of course, no disrespect towards anyone who lives in these types of situations. There was like, but it was just like trailer parks and like houses with their porches falling off. And like for like a mile, it was just a lot of dilapidated like housing structures. And then I saw like a break in the houses, and then set back this nice brick church, really like kept up well. And like, Jesus Christ, this is what Casey's always talking about. And I couldn't believe it. It really was. I don't even know what I don't even know the word for it. I just saw it and thought, oh yeah, this is really fucked up. Like, this church can't be for those people. I don't know who's going to this church. Maybe no one's really going to it anymore, but I was just like, this feels a little dark. Like, you can clearly tell that this community is struggling financially. It's rural, right? They're not, they don't have like there's no like, there probably isn't great jobs in the area as far as like, oh, let me go to this business and get like a good salary here. There's no office job. I mean, we're in the middle of like kind of nowhere. I think it was Pennsylvania, maybe. We might have been in Virginia, or West Virginia, whatever. We're not in West Virginia long on the trip, but either way, I was like, it feels bad when there's not a lot of good opportunity, but for some reason, like the church is maybe the best, business decision. Like, that just felt really.
Yeah, those little towns, man, they're dying out there in a lot of those rural parts of the country and stuff, because there's just no economy out there.
Yeah,
like the mid-sized ones, like there's a few here in Kansas that seem like they're just building and building and building and building, like Salina, Dodge City, Garden City. They're like not big cities or anything by any means, but 30, 40, 50,000 people, like those ones are doing great. But the surrounding communities of like these, the old school, like little bitty town with this one intersection downtown area that has never had more than like one restaurant and one little store and stuff. Like there's just nothing for people in those areas. So they're drying up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really wild. I mean, I don't often go through areas like that. Just, even out where I live is, it's not rural. We like to pretend it is, but if you live in Massachusetts, you're really not too far from something. Like there's usually like something around, but I'm like, Pennsylvania is obviously really big, or maybe we're in Virginia, but there's a lot of similarities. And when you're just like, even on the highways, just all like, you just see, it's all scenery. But if you get off, it's just like little podunk towns. Yeah, I forget. Really, you do, and those obviously the people who get frustrated by. I'm sure for the most part, they're the people who get liberal elites and bullshit like that. But of course, I would push back and talk about maybe the misunderstandings of what their political party is doing for them in those communities as well. Not saying that there's an easy answer to it, but point being, those people, regardless of your political affiliation, are really, despite the words that people use to get them on board and the rhetoric that they might find compelling, they're definitely left in the dust by pretty much everybody. And I don't even know what the right answer to that is, too, right? Like, you're not going to just like build a skyscraper there and rent that out to like space out to a bunch of corporations. Like, there's no good solution to that. The factory closed. I mean, it's possible it went overseas, but maybe it's just an industry that's dying. I don't know. It really does suck, and I actually felt a level of disappointment outside of the church thing too. Just being like, there really isn't a lot. I mean, if you grow up in that community, I mean, your chances of getting out of it are obviously harder. I mean, it's just like any type of issue that you would, it almost feels like in some level the same issues that you experience or that you hear from people in inner cities when it comes to economic disenfranchisement and inability and less opportunity. It really affects these communities similarly.
I think there's some similarities there for sure. Like, get a job, help yourself out. It's like, where? There are no jobs. Like, there are no jobs here.
Unless you want to serve breakfast at the local diner. It's like,
yeah, and most of these towns don't even have one of those, Most of them don't even have a grocery store. You have to drive 30, 40 miles, 50 miles sometimes to get to a town that has something, and now it's a Walmart and the type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird right now, man. There's like such a misalignment of like what's available and what's needed. And, even like my company has a manufacturing facility in the little town that's closest to me, and they have a decent sized staff and they cannot keep staffing,
really?
Yeah, it's a small town. There's people there that need work, but for some reason, like, you just cannot keep people on staff. And they'll put up ads and stuff, and they'll get 3 applications over the course of months, and it's tough right now. Every business that I deal with, which I deal with a lot of car dealerships and repair shops and stuff, they're all shorthanded. And
yeah,
I don't know where the help's going to come from, because there's also like a total like lack of people in trade schools and stuff like that. Like, we need those people. And if we continue to need those people and not get those people, the next wave of like technological advancement is going to render them obsolete.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of these jobs that I think machinery can eventually replace.
Yeah, I know. It's really it's true. I mean, you can spend millions on automation up front, and if you have the capital and the ability and the credit to do so, I mean, it'll save you money over time. And then people the jobs will be available are people who can install fakes for those machines. It's really a weird shift in our society right now because it's happening so fast, right? You look at people in their 40s and 50s. It's like who's going to adapt to that? Nobody. Like the technological shifts happen so fast that the adjustment has to happen over a generation, like with the next generation coming up and learning that. There's not that there aren't any, but there's few people who are going to make those shifts in their career and learn those things as time goes on. And even the mentality of the people who are raising the next generation, like we all got that you need to go to college because we couldn't go to college, it'll get you a good job. Like, and I mean, the amount of millennials who got fucked by college is most of them. Like, it wasn't a good decision for a lot of them. And it wasn't like no one was trying to give us bad advice or put us in debt for no reason. Anyone who gave us that advice was trying to look at the opportunities that they felt like they missed and, hope that we were able to have more opportunities. We didn't. Everyone who graduated with like English degrees or, hey, Bible degrees, like, what do you get? I mean, that was my fault. Yeah. Comms. Like, now, I don't know. So it's tough. Like, you look at the information, like I was specifically told not to get into trades, right? Like, you don't want to do that. You want to go to college and get a desk job or something.
Yeah. So, in lighter news, it's my dog's birthday today.
Hey, happy birthday! How old?
He's 9. So
That's
this is my
getting up
German
there.
Shepherd, Django.
Yeah.
So probably going to take him outside, let him find a nice turd to eat, just really
Nice.
enjoy
Happy
himself,
birthday,
live his
Django.
best life.
Dude, I have some lighter news too. More stuff from my from that I saw on my trip here. This is the last thing I got, and I laughed very hard at this. So, one of the accidents that we pulled off the road and hit an alternate route for was in West Virginia. It was we ended up passing the West Virginia line on this like little back route, and another one of these very rural type towns. And as soon as we get off the highway, start driving maybe like 2 minutes, and I see like this rundown looking building, but it's got the sign that says Gentlemen's Club on it. And I don't know what I mean. It just didn't look nice, and it did
looked
say
pretty bleak.
Yeah, and it said this is like, come check out our day shift, and then underneath it said closed because of COVID. And then, but what was interesting is there wasn't just one. Less than a mile down the road, another Gentlemen's Club closed. Another mile down the road, another Gentlemen's Club. I passed four Gentlemen's Clubs in this town on this road, and one of them, this is the best part, was literally right next door to a middle school.
Nice. Was this like close to a state line?
Yeah, it was the West Virginia state line. I think we were still in West Virginia at the time.
So that's funny because I've noticed that like I traveled a lot for a few years, and went to some
crazy
out of the way
clubs.
places. Yeah. And like there's a town like that in Wisconsin. So if you go to like northeast Wisconsin, there's a town right on the border with Michigan that's split in half. I don't remember what it's called on the Wisconsin side. On the Michigan side, it's called Iron Mountain, I think. But anyways, it's a very small community, a very out of the way place. And it's like biggest boom season is like snowmobile season. It's on the trail. People go, if you're not familiar with that part of the country, one of the things people like to do is they'll get snowmobiles and they'll just go on these like long distance treks. So they might be out for days driving across the entire like upper peninsula of Michigan or the northern part of Wisconsin or something like that. And it's funny because like the little downtown area in the Wisconsin side of town is the same thing. It's got like 4 different strip clubs all in a row. And you're like, how do they staff these? How do they keep these places open? Like there cannot be that many people here, for that. But yeah, it is funny. That's like one of those loophole situations.
Oh yeah,
you can't on this side of the line, but over there you can.
Dude, I think it being next to the middle, like being next to, like, I don't know if you watched the show Parks and Rec, but
a little bit. It's been a while.
That was the first thought that came to my mind when I saw the strip club next to a middle school. It was like, that would be an episode of Parks and Rec where somebody wants to open. There's all this back and forth on whether or not that's a goofy ass town meetings. They would always have like their town hall meetings, and the crazy people from town would give their position and say all sorts of weird stuff. And that felt like an episode of Parks and Rec to me, because there's no chance that has not been like come up many times at like their town meeting, whether or not you should have a strip club. Like you walk out the front door of the middle school and you can see the strip club right there. So it's like, you can see all the people in the parking lot just chilling and smoking their cigarettes. And then like from the middle school front door,
it's like at least put it next to the high school.
Maybe build
like a pipeline.
Yeah, I know, a pipeline. That high school to Gentlemen's Club pipeline. Yeah.
What cracks me up is like porn stores.
Oh yeah, like, there's so many big signs for those too on the way down.
Oh yeah, that's like a total like truck route sort of thing,
Oh yeah.
But they're never nice. And I'm not talking about like, you got like the Cirilla's couples whatever store, like those are fine. I'm sure they're kind of all over. They look clean. They're usually in a decent like in shopping part of town.
Okay.
But then you got like there's one in downtown Wichita, like south of the main drag there, called the Circle Cinema. It's
Circle
like
Jerk
this,
Cinema.
dude. It is a nightmare. Like, it's this round building, and it looks like no one has done any maintenance on this thing since like 1977 when it was built.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
looks ragged. And then, you'll be driving by and you'll see like some, like a, kind of doughy old man sort of like shuffling out of there with his brown paper bag, kind of looking over his shoulder and stuff.
Sunglasses on, his hat brim pulled down over his eyes.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing, man? The internet exists. You don't have to buy analog porn.
Dude, that's what doesn't make any sense about how these things stay in business. There's this one that we always would notice on the way, because it's like, I think middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania.
Is it pink?
I don't remember. You can see it from the highway, and there's like nothing around it. But I want to say it was like I want to say it might be called the Lion's Den. I don't know. There's this huge billboard that I remember seeing all the time, and they've updated it. I was like, I haven't done that trip since we moved back from. So it's been it's been like 10 years since I've made this trip, and you forget a lot about the trip. But then driving down, I just saw the billboard, and I'm like, oh no shit, Lion's Den's still in business, and I think they have a new billboard. Like,
I think that's a chain.
Okay.
There's Lion's Dens all over the place. Like, if you hit the highways across the country, you'll see Lion's Dens.
The signs are like, I don't know, they advertise the amount of whatever it is, just like porn or
10,000 videos.
Yeah, you're like, cheaper, I guess. But then we left the house at 3:45 and that. So like when you're passing the rest stops and shit at like in the middle of the night, and all the truckers are just parked there. I mean, that's what they're all doing in the back of their little cabs there. It's just watching the porn they picked up at the Lion's Den. So
maybe shaking hands with a friend they met inside.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hanging out with the.
If you go to like I-70, which cuts across Kansas, like from Kansas City to Denver, there's one like right as you leave civilization, like west of Salina, that it's an old dilapidated gas station. Nice. And it's like out. I mean, it's the middle of. There's nothing around this thing. Not a town for quite a while. And it's like this crappy, disgusting old gas station. And they didn't even. It's a hand painted sign, and they didn't even finish it. It just says adult.
Nice. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah. There's always like two cars.
Oh God.
Unless there's only one.
I love when you see that, dude. You're like, this place isn't gonna last long. It's like the brunch crowd at the local strip club. Oh my God. Man. All right. Well, let's go ahead and introduce our guest here. I do want to make a quick note. Well, I'll make that. Do I want to make that before or after? It doesn't matter. Our guest is Stephanie Drury. She is known as Stuff Christian Culture Likes on Instagram and Twitter. She posts just, goofy shit that Christians like. A lot of mega pastor stuff. She calls out a lot of bullshit from evangelical culture. And she was really fun. It was great to talk to her and hear her story. These accounts that have that kind of blow up calling out these cultures and whatever, like you don't know who they are behind them. I mean, obviously we got to talk to Christian Nightmares. Granted, we don't even know his real name, so we still don't really know who he is. But getting to know these people and hearing them and their stories and why they do what they do is really fun, and putting a personality behind these accounts. And it's cool. So we had a great conversation with Stephanie. The thing I do want to point out, I think I call it out in the episode too, but just for my own peace of mind and people listening who know me, my family, things like that. We do talk about like discipline and, growing up getting spanked and people breaking cycles and things. And I was making a reference to, people breaking cycles, and
I think people will understand.
Okay, I just feel bad. I made a comment about like, if my dad was mercilessly beaten, and then he like breaking that cycle, like for some people might look like, just not doing that, maybe just spanking your kids. But my point, the only point I wanted to make is, it sounds like I just talk about my dad being abused as a kid, and I just don't. That's is not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to make like a general statement about breaking the cycle. So
Yeah,
anyway,
he wasn't, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I just want to make the point that I'm not throwing out there that my dad's a victim of childhood abuse. I just think that's important to, to mention in case people are going to listen. Now they're going to be, anyone who listens is like, it's like, oh, interesting. They talk to my dad. Like, I didn't realize you were abused as a kid. Like, what are you talking about? Like, oh yeah, your son just runs his mouth like a fucking idiot on his podcast.
Stay strong, Mr. Shipman.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been feeling a little weird about that. So I just wanted to make the call out. That's all. Get off my case, man.
Yeah. Good episode. Definitely some interesting things about how Stephanie grew up and her parents and stuff like that. I think you'll find it fascinating. So join the Discord if you want to hang out with us and a whole bunch of other cool people of, similar upbringing. You can find the link to it in any of our social media. There's usually some pretty funny stuff being posted around in there, and a lot of like drive-by things, crazy things you saw on the street.
Sharing pictures of goofy Christian shit they find in the wild is always fun.
Yeah, it's a blast. So join us there. And, as always, if you like the show, we would really appreciate it if you'd leave us a review on iTunes, share with a friend. And so with that in mind, enjoy our conversation with Stephanie Drury.
All right, everybody, we are here with our guest, Stephanie Drury. You might know her as Stuff Christian Culture Likes on Instagram and Twitter. And Stephanie, thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot about you that is going to be interesting that I have really no clue about. I feel like I'm pretty new to, I'm not super new to the Instagram, but following you on Twitter is a bit newer. And I feel like that lets people into your life a little bit more. But it's probably, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's bad on me. Maybe I don't read good on Instagram.
It's
laughing
so
at your memes for
social
a while,
media.
that's for sure.
Oh, dude, thank you. No, Instagram. I've been doing the Twitter for like 10 years, and then I just only like a year ago I started just basically doing what I do on Twitter. I just copy it and put it on Instagram, just in case like the other platform dies. I just can't do TikTok. That ship has sailed, but I'm fluent in Instagram. So yeah, it's just a bunch of like double. I feel bad about the double posting.
Yeah, well, people are not. I'm new to Twitter, and that is a weird world. I'm not sure I love it yet, but
well, it's such like my kids are 16 and 19, and they're like only old people are on Twitter, and I'm like, I think you're right. I do think it's a generational thing.
Well, they're
I
all
like that idea.
Yeah.
How old are you guys? Can I ask, just for point of reference?
Yeah. So I'm 33, and
I'm 34.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so it's like a little bit of a gap, but not enough where it doesn't seem like we're on too dissimilar of a wavelength when it comes to Christian experience.
It's like we all have the same resilience about switching over to TikTok. I think that's an age thing. That's between us and the younger generation. We're like, it's just such a toilet.
That's the next gap.
So Stephanie, let's get an idea of like just your general Christian upbringing. I know there's you've done I don't know. It seems like you've been involved in a few different Christian circles that have had a lot of issues, but let's see where it all started.
Yeah. So my parents are with the Navigators. I don't know if you've heard of them. They were started around the same time as Campus Crusade for Christ, like in the 50s. Okay. So it was all under the Billy Graham umbrella. Like if you're climbing, if you go up to the top of the chain, and it's just like this ministry. They run Nav Press Books, which is a big, I guess, Christian publishing house out of the Colorado Springs. But my dad's an ordained Southern Baptist minister, but we did like kind of free ball ministry everywhere, like kind of lived in different places. And I wasn't ever really quite sure what they did. Besides, they'd ask me like, "What does your dad do? You guys have a nice enough house and a pool and stuff." I'm like, "I don't know. We pray and people send us money." So that's kind of how that went. But they were constantly having Bible studies, and we were like, they went to like 3 church services like every Sunday at different churches a lot of the time because there was like networking involved. So just very like Christian music, focus on the family, Dobson, Bill Gothard seminars, that sort of thing.
Okay, all the good stuff.
Was
Maybe
how
they
I
like
grew
licked
up.
envelopes for Christian solicitation letters.
So did. Oh my God, the envelopes, the amount of mail coming in and out of our house. Yes. Yeah. What about you guys?
They had some
Are you
controversies,
preachers'
didn't they,
kids
the
or just
Navigators?
who? Oh, if they have, I haven't heard too much about it because again, they got a lower profile, but Bill Gothard, Focus on the Family, all Campus Crusade. I know there's kind of controversy there. And
Yeah.
get this, when that family, do you remember that documentary, The Family, that came out, I want to say a couple of years ago? I think it's still on Netflix, but it's about this basically a cult out of Washington, D.C., where high-ranking government officials are members of this thing. And the guy who started the National Prayer Breakfast is at the top of that chain. Well, they were showing a lot of footage in that documentary at Glen Eyrie in Colorado Springs. And I'm like, I basically grew up there. We went back there all the time. That was like the headquarters of the Navigators. So that's when I started to go, yeah, I kind of grew up in a cult. And it's just when it started to really click. It's like, well, it would make sense.
Glen Eyrie was the headquarters?
For the Navigators. Yeah, there's a castle out there. General Palmer built, the guy who founded Colorado Springs, and it's gorgeous. It's right by the Garden of the Gods. It's like where all the rock formations are. I mean, it really is kind of like a little Garden of Eden out there. But to make all those connections has been pretty major for me.
Yeah, that's weird, man. I've been hiking at Glen Eyrie before. I feel like there was a fire there at some point, and they haven't really let anyone back in since.
I think you're right. I think I heard something about that. Yeah.
Huh. So your parents did the Navigators. You didn't really understand what they did. Did you have like a regular, like throughout your childhood, a regular like Sunday that's like church service that you were a part of, or did you guys do a lot of traveling? What was that like?
Yeah. We mainly went to Baptist and Bible churches, and we'd be at one for a few years, and then my parents would have some kind of dust up with the leadership, and a lot of it had to do with like the giving, they would get confronted on how they spent the money that the church donated to their ministry, and then they'd get mad.
No way. Like on that pool. What'd they drive? What kind of cars did you drive?
Oh, you know what? That's interesting. They drove like the highest end. I remember they're into these Mitsubishis that I want to say, it's not a Galant. It had a Diamante or something. This is the 80s and 90s, but it looked exactly like a BMW. Like it was like the highest end without, it wouldn't get them in too much trouble.
It's like pseudo luxury.
Exactly. So
it's like that top of the line Camry where it's like, that's nice.
Yes, but, the glorified Lexus, that top of the line, or I guess a Lexus is a glorified Camry. I definitely had regular childhood stuff. And, we did not personally do that, but we got invited to lots of fancy trips. Like there was a guy out of Oklahoma City whose pool at his house was shaped like an oil derrick that we would go visit. And he was a big donor, and he'd take us on these trips. And I'm like, I love this life, like going to their house. I'm like, they live in a palace. They basically did in Oklahoma City, of course, but they would take us on trips. We were gifted, hashtag gifted, all, stuff constantly. So it was a real mind fuck, because you're looking at your friends whose parents like go to a regular job. And I'm like, what do you guys do all day besides like make a pot of coffee and sit on the couch and, talk to people about their spiritual life? And I don't know. I don't know.
It's like being a senator. It's like less about the salary and more about them perks.
Oh, they had a lot of perks that they were very attached to. And there was, to be fair, I do think that they truly believed in Jesus, and they tried a lot, they tried. I think they had true conversion experiences like in the late 60s when the Jesus movement was happening. And that's when
Okay,
they got
yeah.
involved with the ministry. They didn't really grow up in Christian households, really. So it was like a big thing for them to hear the good news and to experience something. And I'm down with that. And I feel like I always had that awareness growing up. Like I didn't have a problem with Jesus. I felt like I had a special, if I can say this, a special awareness that what I was seeing and what was true about Jesus, like they didn't really jibe. And I just had, that's one of my earliest memories is kind of being aware of that. So I think that actually really was helped me, throughout growing up.
We think
Yeah.
that's a tough thing for. Okay, you talk to somebody who's completely outside of evangelical circles and they're only looking in at some of like the scandals and stuff like that. I think it's really easy to categorize all of it as like this big nefarious scam meant to like hoodwink people. And like growing up in it, I mean, even if you have a really bad taste in your mouth, like we knew so many people through those churches and organizations and stuff that were good people with good intentions, that maybe the message got co-opted. It doesn't excuse the bad things that they did, misusing funds and stuff. And of course, anybody who is an abuser is, there's nothing to say about them other than, screw them. But there's a lot of good people that maybe took part in things that raised, would make you raise an eyebrow now. But they weren't evil to the core or anything like that. I mean, I feel like I know what you're saying there, because I have a lot of that same experience where I'm like, yeah, they're not bad people. Just the message was co-opted.
Yeah. And that makes it tough. You have to hold that tension for a lot of it. And you also want to name outright abuse. And especially if they won't acknowledge it. And so I think that's where a lot of the most damage is done in that space.
I think the problem, it's also like they so frequently don't acknowledge it either. And that's what's really difficult is like, there's so many opportunities to do the right thing and acknowledge the issues, and they just sweep under the rug. Like if you just did the right thing, you might not have so many people hating you right now. There'd still be plenty, but just be like, oh shit, this person did this and we need to deal with it. And then people might actually respect you, even if they don't agree with you.
Exactly. Yep.
Like they circle the wagons around the worst people. And it's like, sometimes you want to just grab somebody that, and be like, you have no kinship with this person. They suck. Just let them suck. Like you don't have to defend them.
Yeah. And they're invested for a reason. They're like, this person, I need this person to hold up the scaffolding that I've created around my worldview so that I don't have to let it crumble and face the sorrow and grief under that. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Is kind of
100%.
It comes down to.
Yeah. So did you, I mean, your parents did that all through high school. Did you like carry on to like Christian college, or what'd you do? Like, what was your Christian experience like after kind of moving out on your own and did you make your faith your own? Was it a personal faith?
I did. And I feel like I said a little bit earlier that I had an actual encounter with whoever Christ truly is, Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call it, that really sustained me, and I couldn't explain it to anyone. So it was private. And for that reason, when I went to college, I didn't go to Christian schools. I went to the University of Arkansas, and then I graduated from Texas State University. And when I was there, I would kind of would check out ministries like Campus Crusade and see what was going on, because that was comfortable and familiar. But it's also, that's when I started to get really tired of it. Like, all right, you want us to witness? I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Witness. Do you know the whole witnessing culture? Like,
yeah, we went to Liberty University. So we know
that's right.
Culture.
That's right. You talked about that. Oh my goodness.
That's one of your required classes.
Oh, of course it is. It's the stupidest thing. It's so contrived. It's so manipulative. It's so not what Jesus did. Like, didn't Jesus live to be 30 before he even opened his mouth about any of his quote ministry? He just had friends,
Right.
And anyway, yeah, don't get me started on that. But I just remember really losing momentum with it around college as far as the culture. And like I'm kind of being confused about relationships as far as like, all right, they really want us to get married. What is that about? And
Oh yeah.
purity culture and being like, what is this shit? And also is, yeah, so much around that. So I just started like having like my anxiety and depression started surfacing around then. And I really felt like it was connected to that. I was actually diagnosed with depression when I was 13, and no
Okay.
one did, it went untreated. It was just like, it was a diagnosis, and they're like, oh, okay, so that's what's wrong with you. You're depressed. Nothing happened. And for it, then
Wow.
I started actually having panic attacks in college, and I knew it had to do with all of this morality, and also the fact that I just wasn't loved. There wasn't love in the community. There wasn't love in the church that I could find. There were people who didn't go to church that I found to be really loving and caring. And so I had to reconcile that. And
Hmm.
that was like a giant thing I'd been suppressing probably all my life, to realize
Yeah.
I do think my parents loved me, but they loved me as much as they could, and they had their own stuff they were dealing with from their growing up, and there just weren't a lot of resources there. And so I was kind of on my own, and when that came crumbling down, just when it's terrifying to have anxiety and depression, and you're always wondering, is my life, am I going to die any second by my own hand or by like a heart attack type of thing? And it wasn't as easy to
Yeah.
talk
Right.
about back then. So this was like the mid
Mm.
90s, I guess, and I was kind of alone with that. So I really do think that the cognitive dissonance required to be in Christian culture was at the root of that.
Yeah. Did you start getting your like? So I'm guessing that your untreated depression had a lot to do with just mental health issues not being taken seriously in the
Mhm.
church. Is that the case there?
Yeah, and just lack of family support. Like just the whole culture of not listening, just inability to listen, and to be told you just need to pray harder and obey God
Yeah.
better when you're trying to go to them with what is this profound grief I'm feeling that I'm
Hmm.
constantly trying to shove down. And I now see my all anxiety and depression as a kind of canary in a coal mine, going, something's wrong and you need to pay attention. It's your body trying to get your attention, because the body keeps the score and all of your stuff is stored in your cells, and if you press
Yeah.
it down long enough, it's going to come out sideways. So
Did
I
you
just feel
start
really,
dealing with it
yeah, I
before? Sorry. Did you start dealing with it before you like your faith started? Like before you started
mm,
having like this disconnect, or is that like a simultaneous kind of thing?
yeah, I think they were so intertwined. I think it was kind of like chicken egg with the two of
Yeah.
those things. So I'm just really grateful it's so much more acceptable to talk about now, because being alone with it is the very worst part.
Yeah, I can imagine that being. I luckily, I mean, I never outside of like your typical childhood here and there's of feeling down in the dumps. It's like that. It's like anyone's experienced that on a general level, and I just can't imagine the feeling that it was for people who had actual like depression and anxiety that was a baseline for them or a constant and it went untreated, and that I could actually probably trick myself into thinking that because it was like you would have those like moments here or there, but because like if I did pray and read my Bible, like given enough time, I'm gonna feel better because that's just
Mm-hmm,
how I was. So, but I could probably trick myself into thinking that
What?
what
So prayerful reflection prescribed to you did work. Is that
yeah,
what you're saying?
I'm saying I could trick myself at that time. I don't think I was doing it into thinking that like, oh, I prayed and read my Bible, and 3 days later I'm feeling better. So maybe there is something to that message, as
well,
opposed to
it's your
Doctors could
only,
so,
consistently give you the placebo drug, Sam.
yes.
yeah.
Well, you know what? That's how it works. Like you have no other option. You're like, I have to feel better, and so I'm going to make myself feel better. The Bible, and the Bible certain parts of it can be comforting and soothing, certain parts not. But I know what you mean. Like, okay, I'll just dig into this and keep on not trusting my heart because it's deceitful above all things. Who can know it? So
Yeah, yeah. It's like horse. I mean, I don't know, Dig, if you're into horoscopes, but I'm
oh
not,
yeah,
and
I am.
it's like that. Oh, everyone sees themselves in something if you're just told it the right
Mm-hmm.
way, and
Mm-hmm.
Christianity
Mm-hmm.
uses a lot of the similar mechanisms, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally see that.
So you said you stopped going to church around like being in college, and but you didn't really start thinking like you felt that disconnect of I don't. You had your own personal experience with Christ, as you said, or whatever that is, and then you stopped really going to church because of the disconnect and behavior and life change. But what was next for you when you like as far as how what your involvement looked like in Christianity from there?
I never really fully stopped going to church because there was always something about church that I like. Like I can go to almost any church, and like I like going when they're empty and there's no one else there, because it's the people, it's the culture that's really triggering for me. But there's something holy there that I do like. So there was some, and I couldn't even name that at the time. I'm still trying to separate the culture out from actual ancient Christianity, and so I got married and moved to Seattle. My husband, he has let's see, his master's in theology from Regent College. He's a Baptist preacher's kid too, uh, but from San Francisco, Bay Area. So different, you'd think that would be a different culture, but it's not. It's like, I was like, yay, I'm getting out of the South. But this culture around this, the West Coast Christian is exactly the same. Let me tell you, it's like exactly the
Oh
same.
yeah.
It's uniform, It's yeah. But we moved to Seattle, and that's when my panic attacks started ramping up after a little bit, because my siblings, they graduated college and moved away too, and they were also having anxiety, and they started therapy. So we each started therapy in different states, uh, and we each asked our parents, will you go to counseling with us, because this is the root of a lot of issues here is some relational stuff, and so we need to discuss our upbringing and discuss our current relational patterns. And our parents told each of us no, and they said, it's too bad, we're never going to talk to any of you ever again. Like, this was the email that I got
What?
from, yeah, my parents flat disowned me. I had our pastor at the time, we were going to a Presbyterian church, and he knew my parents, and so he emailed them and CC'd all of us. He's like, I would love to mediate with you if you don't want to go to counseling. Like, maybe I could be the mediator since you know me. And their response was, it's too bad that Stephanie has chosen to walk away from us, and it's too bad that our grandchildren will grow up not knowing us. And our pastor replied to it, and he's like, this is heartbreaking. Do you No one said anything about never seeing you again. Stephanie wants a relationship with you, and it looks like there needs to be mediation in order for there to be both sides to be heard. And they're just like, this is so tragic Stephanie has done this, and to this day that's what they
What?
maintain.
My
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
Just
And
put
they
it
did it to
on
my brother.
you.
Yeah, and they did it to my brother, and they did it to my sister. There's only three of us in the family,
All of
and
you.
yeah, yeah. So
What is it
yeah.
that so are they still involved in ministry and stuff like that, or have they retired from it?
Well, that's another interesting story, because my husband, David, emailed the head of the Navigators and goes, do you know that you have people on your staff who are ministering to people who are not in relationship with their children? And the Navigators'
Bold move.
response was, oh, Stephanie's parents are really scary, so we're not going to confront them. That was their response. So,
God damn. It's
yeah,
like
if
running a
that,
mob.
thank you. They were so protected. So 10 years later, that guy retired, and we heard about it. So David emailed the new head of the Navigators, and he explained the situation. And this guy listened, and this guy said, yeah, that's an issue. That's really too bad, and we can't be having that. And so he went to my parents. They told my parents, and I guess they told everyone in the organization, that they were restructuring, I mean, I'm not saying that they just made up a story. I think they actually were restructuring, and they go, we need, if you're on staff, we need you to reapply for your job. And so we can like do a fit thing and like figure out where to redistribute everybody. And as part of the new contract with my parents, they go, you're going to need to go to counseling with your children and be in relationship with them. And they like had all these resources for, I guess there's a lot of reconciliation ministries and people who are, you know, mediators with Juris Doctorates and stuff who will do this, which is great. And so they offered all these resources, and my parents' response was, we're going to retire instead of do this.
That's unfucking believable.
And no one believed. Yeah, that's what everyone says. And no one also no one cares. You know, it's like that's the problem, is that there's just so much like, how about that? Well, that's really too bad. And no one thinks about the impact that has on kids who are products of this. But I think that this is what is at the heart of Christian culture, is that they will disown you, or you know, you're abandoned if you don't fall in line. Because like, I don't like to throw the word cult around, but that's what cults do. They're like, you need to line up and do what we say, and any independent thinking is seen as an affront.
Yeah.
And that's that's where my anxiety and depression was like screaming at me. And it was terrifying to realize this. Like, I did have like a massive grief response. And I got, you know, I luckily found a really good counselor who, I've had bad counseling and I've had really good counseling. This time I got really good counseling, because they basically saved my life and said, it just helped me see a way forward and grieve what I needed to, and separate from all of that. But that's why I started Stuff Christian Culture Likes, because that culture was just, I saw how devastating it was to me and to all of my friends growing up, and people who were either in the church or were leaving it. It all came down to this, and no one like could really quite put a name to what the exact problem was. But just, there's so much lament around it, and it's not born of love. Love doesn't do that to you. Love heals. Love allows.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because earlier you were talking about, you know, you do feel that your parents loved you in the way that they knew how, but as soon as that, because it's not like counseling is like, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like you walked into that conversation saying, or any of maybe your siblings did, but we reject our faith and it harmed us and we need counseling. It sounds like that wasn't really part of the conversation. So there was no talk of walking away from the faith, it sounds like.
No, there wasn't.
So it was the counseling part that had a problem.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to apologize for stuff, the thing is, they can't apologize. Like, they don't feel sorry for things. They've never apologized to me for anything. They were, and that's, you know, that's what it comes down to. And that's how I'm able to have healthy relationships now, is to realize, oh, does this person care about my feelings? And that's all it takes. Like, all you need is reciprocity, and for someone to listen to you and take you seriously. And that's it. But there's so many people who can't do that, as I'm sure you both know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's got to be like some deep psychological damage. Mm-hmm. Something happened to them at some point at an earlier time that has just robbed them of their humanity in that way. But I get what you're saying. Like, you know, I feel that too, where it's like getting really frustrated and disillusioned with constantly hearing the language of loving your neighbor and ministering to people and caring for the community and bringing people in, and, you know, all of that verbiage that gets used all the time within church and within Christian, you know, everything. And yet just never feeling it, like needing something, needing help, or needing just something as simple as friendship, and just not getting it. It's like, this is a burden, and we have bigger fish to fry. We're trying to send so-and-so to the mission field in Papua New Guinea or something like that. You know, you're being a pest. And really what it comes down to is not like ministering to people. A lot of times it's like you're driving by and you're like, hey, we're headed this way if you guys want to come, but just, you know, be quiet. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's so
Mm-hmm.
sterile and just like I don't know. It just feels like cold and sterile and like indifferent towards people.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is
I think,
because there's no love.
and it's like they're out. So at least in, I think what we came up in, like there was that emphasis on, like there would be the conversations around, what it's like to be Jesus, but it was never because that was just what you should do in light of what you believe. It got turned into a soul saving game, right? You
Mm-hmm.
do it
There's an
so that other
angle.
people can then, you can like, they want it to be mimetic in some way, and then but when you lose it, when you don't have the same beliefs anymore, now that's a threat, and now you're going to hurt the cause of bringing people in,
Mm-hmm.
and rinse and repeat, and it does become devoid of any real love. It's just their actions for the sake of gaining a desired outcome, as opposed to just for the sake of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, it doesn't. Love needs to be the center of it, and if it's not, then everything is going to end in harm. So that's
Yeah.
when I started really deconstructing that as part of all of this. I started my Stuff Christian Culture Likes blog. I was actually and we did blog. This was in, I want to say it was '08 that I started it, because that's when everyone was blogging. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I was on a road trip with my really good friends who are atheists, and that this was let's see, McCain and who was running? Was it Bush or what am I thinking of?
Oh,
They were talking about
2008 was McCain
that
Palin,
was McCain and Palin against the Obama and
Obama and
That
Biden.
Biden.
was
Okay,
Obama. Yep.
so we were we had all this time in the car, and these people had grown up without any kind of religious, I guess, like some random religious stuff, but they're atheists, and they're like, what is the Christian draw to these warmongers? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you all about that. They're like, geez, you know a lot about this. I'm like, yeah, I kind of do. They go, you should start a blog. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should. So I at the time, that book called Stuff White People Like was big, and I mean, this was, like I keep saying, like 15 years ago by now, but so
That's
I was like,
right.
okay, I
I
know what
remember
Stuff
that.
Christian Culture like. So that's, and I like, there was already a Stuff Christians Like blog with this guy, John Acuff, ran it. And that was huge, but it was also straight up Christian culture. And I was trying to like parse out what is actual ancient Christianity and what is evangelical culture. So that's what I
Yeah.
was kind of trying to highlight. If I were to do it now, I would call it evangelical stuff, because that's kind of the buzzword. But
Right.
that's when I started.
Yeah.
That
That's
it was a
definitely a
big part of my
buzzword.
deconstruction, and it like, I started the Facebook page along with it, and then the Twitter, and people were like on board with it because it was speaking to a lot of the stuff. And now there's all the stuff. I mean, there was people have always been doing. I'm not saying I was the first at all, but it just, the response kind of like overwhelmed me. Like, goodness, there's more people talking about this out here. This is great. I've never been able to talk about it.
Yeah, that must have been fairly validating and reassuring, especially because when you
Mm-hmm.
actually, when you remove yourself from those circles, you forget. And if you're not around it and around people who are dealing with the same things, you forget that. I think that's what's so neat about what we're seeing now. Neat's a terrible word for it, because it's people talking about their pain, but it is like, holy shit! Like, it's across. At least our country. Like, there's something particularly American about our brand of evangelicalism. Other countries, I'm sure, deal with it in similar ways, but obviously, what I know is what I see here. And you've just been watching, you've been watching this come to a boil for a while, and now even the response to the evangelical culture now is like they're finally talking about all these expats, and they're like
Mm-hmm.
doing it so poorly, and they don't even know what to do to keep it in, and it's all just like grasping at straws and saying stupid shit to try to dismiss it. When you dismiss such a huge movement,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like small anymore. It's like everyone's talking about it, posting about it, joining in on the conversation, and it's
Mm-hmm.
happening so publicly that their lack of response for so long, and then their response to it has been pretty poor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Did you get
So
any pushback from people you knew or family members or anything? I mean, besides your I'm sure your
Oh,
parents
yeah.
aren't a big fan.
They they don't talk to me, so I don't know. But they will tell what they will tell people is that I tell lies about them on the internet. And, they've said that's gotten back to me, but that's about it. They, it's sad. My kids are 19 and 16. My 19-year-old barely remembers them, and my 16-year-old doesn't at all. And I'm like, it's just how we had to do it because it was a harmful, toxic relationship. But I want to say that just to brag on my kids, sort of for a second, that they are really good with people. Like, their friend groups, they are like, that person doesn't care about my feelings, so I'm just not going to hang out with them anymore. And I'm like, I still can't do that, and I'm 46.
Yeah.
So they've seen it modeled, and we love them, and we validate their feelings, and we listen to them, and that's really all it takes. We don't punish.
What a cool life skill to have before you're 30.
Can you imagine? Like, the world would be a different place if we all could do that. So my son, the 19-year-old, he's like, my friends make fun of me because you guys have never punished me, and he said, you guys just ask me, like, well, what do you want to do, and how do you feel about that, and what do you think the consequences would be? And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. Like, we don't spank, we don't ground, and we just ask them what they think. And like, who are we to tell them what to do and they're great kids. Like, I don't know. I'm just so glad that to be breaking the cycle, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. That's like life. That's parent. I mean, I feel like not everyone, but that's the conversation my wife and I have a lot too. Is like, you're just like, all right, like, what can we just do better? I don't know. I mean, my kids will probably have something that they'll talk to their friends about when they're my age and they're trying to raise kids, and there's going to be something they want to do better too. But the idea behind breaking the cycle in certain cycles is like, that feels like what parenting should be. And I don't know why that was, I don't know. I'm not sure that conversation was exactly the same, but Matt, also when you look at some of the cycles that boomers are like, we're trying to break, or people in the previous generations, like a lot of people who grew up in like the 70s were beaten really bad by their fathers. So it's like the fact that I was just spanked when my dad might have been mercilessly beaten is it is still breaking some sort of cycle, right?
Well, I mean, being spanked, it's really that is beating, and that's taken me a long time to realize in therapy. They're like, you were beaten. I'm like, no, that you kind of, it's corporal punishment. It does the same thing to your cerebral cortex. Like, it affects you psychologically. So I just want to throw that out there. But I suppose an occasional spank is an improvement over being mercilessly beaten with a belt, I suppose. But there's this whole Dobson culture where they were like, have the instrument with which you spank your kids, have it out, so that they can see it all the time. And that is just really messed up. Yeah.
Well, that's a tangential question for you, but because you guys are both parents. So like, I was watching this thing the other day. It was a Dr. Phil episode about this like weird, just grotesque, quote unquote, school for troubled girls. They had all these women that had gone to it, and it was interesting because they used the same curriculum that they used at my Christian school, which was super fun. But a cornerstone of this place and like their view on like what's wrong with the world and stuff, and I've seen this to a lesser degree, but in other circles, is like spanking. Like, spanking has been ousted from society, and this is the result. Look at all these terrible kids. Why is spanking like such a cornerstone thing for those groups of people? Like, what is it about that makes them so obsessed with it?
I feel like I can tell you why. Because it gets results. When you have a need to control someone or something, especially a small child that is utterly dependent on you, like, that is your temptation. Like, you want to beat the shit out of them. I get it. Like, I've been there. It's so difficult. When this you have dropped, you have changed, you have rearranged your fucking life for this child. You have given them all your finances, all your like every emotional droplet. And then they're like, I don't want to eat my peas. And you're like, I am going to put my fist through this wall just to not.
Yep.
It's just like it activates something in you. So I think that is why, like, historically, you beat children. It's like they're seen, not heard, and it takes different iterations throughout every generation. But I just want to validate the primal thing that will come up, and you know what? That could probably come from the history of being spanked. I think that when you personally were spanked, it's more of like an impulse to do to your own kids. Because I do have friends who grew up like hippies who weren't spanked, and they're like, God, I don't really want to do that to my kids. I get mad at them, but I'm like, no, I've had like extreme anger reactions where I'm like, I need to go into another room because you just really something happened with my mood just now. So I just want to put that out there. That
Has anybody tried tasing?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to. Yeah, we shouldn't joke about that because they do that. That has happened. You know,
Okay.
I'm not trying to say don't joke about it because it does seem ridiculous. But you know, you wouldn't believe what they do. Like I work with survivors as part of just some side stuff that I do, and they're like, you know, the Doug Wilson cult. Like I was beaten with special, like certain like insulation tubing because there's all this paraphernalia that these ministries put out there. Like this won't leave bruises on your children, so you won't get in trouble. So beat them with this material. God. Yeah, and yeah. So not to bring it down too hard.
Beating seems to be well, yeah, no, that makes sense. But beating seems to be like a central part of cult discipline.
Oh yeah,
like almost every cult, if you read into them a little ways, you find out that they beat people who were a problem. Like even the most benign, you know, at face value, like the most benign, like Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
They're like these vegan, non-aggressive hippie types, you know, crazy by all counts, but they beat their members, you know. But your explanation of that makes so much sense. I mean, I guess I've never heard it explained that way, but it makes sense.
Now, I do want to make a quick note. I was being, just for the sake of anyone listening, not to clear things up with you, because what do you really know about my life or my parents' history? But I don't know that my dad was mercilessly beaten. I was just trying to make a hyperbolic point.
I don't know that.
I want to clear the air there.
Yeah. And I want to say that I haven't like flown off and like beat my children, but I wanted to, you know. I just want to acknowledge.
Oh yeah.
I hope I don't get in trouble for saying. I mean, I hope that I say that because I want to validate that impulse. Like it's come up in counseling. I'm like, I'm so frustrated, and they're like, "Good, thank you for talking about this to me, your counselor. This is where you should bring it," you know. And
yeah. I mean, my kids are still young. My kids are 5 and 4, and when you're trying to put them to bed and they're throwing a fit,
and you've had a long day, and they will not stay in there. Yes,
that's the first. That's the first time it's sunk in. I was like, because that's the reaction that you would get as a kid. It's like, if you get out of bed again, you're getting spanking, and then you would stay in bed because that was scary. And I'm like, I've wanted to say that so many times because I know it will work, and that's when the results thing kicked in. Like, it works. It gets you what you want in the moment, and my
friends who foster, there's strict rules with foster parents, so like absolutely no spanking of any kind. And when I first heard that, I'm like, how do you do that? I didn't know you could parent without spanking. You know, this was before I had kids, and anyway, but it's just scientifically proven. It's clinically linked to anxiety and depression, all manner of mental illness, to be spanked in childhood. So it's a bad scene.
I know of a couple,
like I said, it forces you to acquiesce.
I know of a couple who chose not to. That's someone I know through someone, but they chose not to foster because they couldn't not. They couldn't not spank. They're like, it's a biblical mandate, and we want to do like help children, but we can't in good conscience foster kids without spanking them. So
biblical mandate,
pretty fucked up. But
is that like a passage in the Bible?
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah, you could link it if you wanted to. I don't think it's. I mean, the Bible was written in a time where you would beat your kids for not listening. So themes are there for sure.
But
that's one of those underlying verse themes, like, you know, you got to stand for the national anthem.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what? I had a counselor tell me once. She said, that passage actually, when they're speaking of the rod, that is the shepherd's staff that was very tall and had the crook in it, and it was so the sheep could see where the shepherd was and have guidance. And that's what the rod was, so that your child could always see where you were and know that you were a secure and safe and loving presence. That it was never meant to say you need to beat your children with the rod.
Interesting. Well, we fucked that one up, I guess. So.
You guys must be reading New King James.
That's the official translation of liberty. I understand.
Stephanie, I don't know if this is something you go into, if we can clip this, if it's not, and strike the question from the record. But you were part of Mars Hill. Is that?
Oh,
did you do that in
I'll
Seattle
tell
and
you.
stuff? I don't know if you want to go into that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's okay if you don't.
No,
Okay.
I love talking about it. Christianity Today will not talk to me about it because I saw a screenshot of a DM that the producer of Christianity Today sent my friend, and he said that I am hostile, I have vitriol, and I'm, quote, frankly vulgar. So that's why he won't talk to me.
So great.
So I'll talk to y'all about it. It's cool to do an entire podcast on a pastor that called women penis homes, but I'm too vulgar for doing a parody account and saying things like he said. Anyway.
Penis homes.
You have a lot of fun things to say about the oral sex and stuff like that too.
Oh,
I don't know if
he was obsessed with that. Did you read his thing where he goes, "Do not jerk off in the mirror because that's sinful, because that's basically being gay." And it's like, okay, Mark, I guess that's something you do and you struggle with. So thank you for letting us in on that.
He's a narcissist and he loves himself and he makes himself horny.
Oh God, I wish my fake Driscoll account hadn't gotten taken away. Twitter just shut it down, like no explanation, around November. So I could be saying
after
so much from that thing
again.
Yeah, right. But let's see, Mars Hill, a lot of my friends were going to it because it started around the time I moved here in the late 90s, and we got involved with a Presbyterian church, a PCA church at the time. So I wasn't tempted by Mars Hill, but I did go to one sermon just because everyone was talking about it. And my vibe was, the fuck is going on here? This guy is horrible. Like there's just, the vibe was horrible, and the audience was hanging on to his every word, just like it was a concert, like, oh, that's so great what he's saying. And I'm like, this is, anyway, I do remember one thing he said from the pulpit, whatever, during the sermon was, wives need to have sex with the lights on if that's what their husband wants. And I remember thinking, how many sexual abuse survivors are in this audience of at least 1,000 people were there? I'm like, and how much harm is this going to do to them? The fact that he said this. So that was just that was my first impression. So shortly after that, I started therapy, that really good therapy I told you about. And part of that was being in a group therapy setting. And there were women there who had gone to Mars Hill. They were members, and they were shaking. They were like physically shaking because they go, I'm going to get in so much trouble if they find out I'm here. As a member, I signed a covenant, is what they called it. Not even a contract, a covenant is what they called it. And they said, it says that I'm not supposed to get counseling from anyone who isn't in Mars Hill, like that Mars Hill doesn't approve. But those counselors just make me feel worse because they go, I had a job, I had a career. I was pressured to quit it and have babies. So I quit my job and I have these babies, and now these women were experiencing suicidal ideation and they wanted to harm their children. And they were terrified of these impulses, and they had nowhere to go because the Mars Hill counselors were telling them, you just need to pray harder and submit to your husband more. And so as a last ditch effort, these women, like just a small number of them came, but they were like going to get in trouble if it was found out that was where they were. And I'm like, how do I call this out? This is a huge attack. And it was hugely triggering for me to be like, yeah, you're stuck, you're silenced, your hands are tied. So that's when I started the fake Driscoll Twitter, and just kind of would say stuff in Mark's voice to like, just as a parody. And within like 12 hours of starting that account, I got an email from Mars Hill where it had all this legalese, and they were saying that it was like, you're allowed to have a Twitter account, but you need to make abundantly clear that this is a parody and it's not really Mark. I go, I don't know how much clearer it could be than being called fake Driscoll. And so I made that my bio. Like, Mars Hill said to tell you that this is a parody account. But Yeah, so I did that for a little while. And when Mark finally like stepped down, I remember like being told, I got 3 separate messages from different people who are like, don't tell anyone this, but like you and Warren Throckmorton were the main reason he had to step down, because they couldn't handle the social media onslaught. So
Really?
for whatever,
Whoa.
yeah.
That's
And I'm
validating.
not, yeah, I guess. Except everyone's like, aren't you glad he stepped down? And I go, no, he's just going to move and start another church. And he totally did in Arizona. And are you up on that about how he's separating families from each other and hiring private investigators to follow the people who are dissenting against him and stuff? Are you keeping track of
Oh my
that?
God, he's insane.
It's this
Doing
church
the
called
Scientology
Trinity
route.
in Arizona. It's so that's fun. But
Wait, so
that's
you started the fake Driscoll account after you had left? Like how long did you go there for? It's not you
I
were
went
a
to
member.
exactly one. I was never a member of Mars Hill.
Oh, you weren't a member.
I
Okay.
went to one sermon at Mars Hill in
Okay,
like
okay.
'06. But I was in group therapy with women who were members of Mars Hill, and that's when I said I have to start exposing this in some way. How do
All
I
right,
do
I
that?
see.
So
Wow.
yeah.
In my Liberty days, I remember him being like at the height of his popularity. It was probably, I guess it would have been 2008 was when I went through the whole like I'll check this guy out, and I listened to like a number of his sermons, and it's like it's so weird to look back on, because like at that time I was like eating that shit up too. I was like, oh my God, like to see like the way that he taught, and like that his like the way he had that authority, and that this is right. It's like that was appealing at that time. Like you like seeing that kind of confidence. Now, I'm not saying for everyone, but for me, who is like Mr. Evangelical poster child, and
Mhm.
now it's like you hear any hint of that at all, and it throws up so many red flags, and
Mhm.
it makes me cringe thinking about how much I found what he had to say is like a mix of entertainment, and then it was also, I think it maybe because at that time, I think maybe what he was meeting for people was like, there was no question. It was like, I'm giving you the answers, but he would do it with this facade of like occasionally dangle this carrot in front of you that says it's okay to think differently about a couple of things here and there.
Mhm.
And he would let you know very clearly which ones those were. But um, as
Mhm.
things went on, and I remember it like it would have been in probably, I forget when his book came out. One of like he wrote a couple, but the one that like he got in trouble for boosting or something like that. But that was one of the first like the when I like the his like first like publicly shameful things, right?
Hmm. I can't remember
Yeah,
what the
I
first
guess
thing was.
maybe not. I mean, because he did have that he was like, oh, he's the cussing pastor. Didn't he get that
Oh
nickname? And
yeah,
like
but it was
that
cool,
was
you know. Now,
cool.
if a woman pastor had been that, that would be vulgar. Frankly,
Well, the
vulgar.
first problem is the woman was a pastor, so
Exactly. That would never happen. That's not biblical. I mean, we wrote those female apostles out of the canon to nip that in the bud right away. So,
yeah. Yeah.
uh,
So, what do you think about stuff now, Stephanie? I can't
hmm,
tell. If you
hmm.
still have any. Well, yeah.
Well, I'm a member of a Vineyard Church. I tried to leave Christianity, and I've tried it out. I'm like, oh my God, if the people who if my parents told me about God and they don't love me and they're treating me this in this way, then God must not exist. And I found that not to be true. Um, the experience I referenced earlier, I mean, I want to say I've had like some mystical experiences that won't allow me to let go of this, and have really, really been a guidepost for me. And I'm really grateful for them. I don't like to talk about them because not everyone has them, and they're very strange and
Yeah.
abstract to a lot of people. So, but I just want to say that this is the reason that I still go to church. I go to a Vineyard Church on the weekends that has women pastors, and they're affirming, because I don't think I can sit under a male pastor again. And I can't be a
Because
member
they
of a
don't call
church that
themselves penis homes.
like even the progressive pastors that I've had, like male pastors that call themselves progressive, they have tons of internalized misogyny, and so do I, because it's a
Sure.
patriarchy. But it's just something that I cannot raise my children in, or I just can't be there anymore. It's just too much. So another thing is I love going to Catholic Mass. And before the pandemic, I went every single day before work because there was a Catholic cathedral right by my office. And now that I'm working from home, I can't do it as much, but I go as much as I can because I love it. And I won't
Really?
convert fully to I won't convert to Catholicism because they don't allow women to be priests and the whole gay thing and and several other things associated with for organized religion. But I have to say, like, I love
Yeah.
Jesus. I love going to churches, and there's something special to me about Catholic churches because the Blessed Sacrament is there, and the whole doctrine of transubstantiation, where they say that Catholics believe that that's the actual presence of Christ in the host, and that
Yeah.
I was always taught growing up, oh, Catholics that's idolatry. They worship statues, they worship Mary, like that's nuts, transubstantiation isn't real. And now I'm kind of like, there's something magical about being in this peaceful church. Like Catholic churches feel different than Protestant churches, and what my conclusion to that is that the Blessed Sacrament is there. So there's just something mystical and lovely about being in a Catholic church. I really love it. And I'll go up and get a blessing when everyone else is getting communion, and that's really special to me. Like I feel something when I'm there, and I just have to believe that love is the bottom line, and it does exist. It's just um, obscured in the church in a lot of places out of the need for control. So um, if we can just bring the focus back to loving people and elevating people on the margins like Jesus did, I think that's actual Christianity.
Yeah, it sounds like you draw a lot of like peace and such from like just being in a spiritual environment and the some of the ritual and symbolism and stuff like that involved. Like is it kind of like a meditative state for you when you're in those atmospheres? Or
It can be, but more than that, it feels like I'm connecting with something kind of heavenly, if I can say
okay.
that. And it could, I want to differentiate it from meditation, just in that I believe I practice transcendental meditation, and I believe that is kind of letting go of your thoughts and settling into your body and feeling, and that's how I differentiate meditation from what I experience in churches. So I get what you're saying because it is so peaceful, but there's just something to it where I just feel really reassured and safe. And I feel like there is love there. So I think it says something too that I feel safer in empty churches than I do when there's people there because the
Yeah.
people have historically been pretty harmful. Not all, hashtag not all Christians, not all,
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
some of my greatest healing has been through love other people have shown me, but there's still like there's a lot of baggage around it. So
Right.
it says something though that I even like to go, because people say you should not still want to go to church. Most people who've been through what you've been through don't even want to walk into the building. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, seriously. I think what you had to say about that is really neat. I think it's beautiful. I think that a lot of people in your space of the continually calling out the bad aspects of bad culture, they get lumped in with, oh, yeah, like people who just hate the church, or another one of those people who abandoned the
Yeah,
faith and now they're just reeling against something that they're angry with a God they don't believe in, and
I
they
know.
say all those
I
dumb
know.
fucking things about it. But for you to be able to have those experiences, call out that culture, and still find peace and meaning and love in that space, as done in a way that feels authentic, I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's been a gift. It really has. Um, I feel hesitant to even be really talking about it because I don't want to make anyone feel like, oh, you need to go back into a system that has harmed you. But that's
Yeah.
not what I'm experiencing when I do it. I'm pretty careful about that now. So
Yeah.
finally, at
Yeah.
this ripe old age of 46.
Man, well, Stephanie, this has been a lot of fun. I really
Hmm.
appreciate your talking with us, telling us your story, and I really appreciate your Instagram and your Twitter accounts. That's for sure.
Thank
is
you
there
so
anything
much
you
for
want to?
hearing.
Yeah. Is there anything you want? I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say that you didn't get to, or you have any thoughts that you want to get out before we wrap up here.
Oh, that's so kind. I don't think so. I've talked quite enough, and I just really appreciate your curiosity and having a platform. So thank you guys.
Yeah. So on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, it's just Stuff Christian Culture Likes. You can find you there.
Facebook and Twitter. Facebook and Instagram are at Stuff Christian Culture Likes, and Twitter is Stuff CC Likes. Now, my Facebook account has recently, I can't post to it. It's very strange.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. It kind of happened around the same time as the Big Driscoll Twitter going down, but
we'll have to get Zuck on the phone.
I know. What's going on, you guys? So
he's building a rocket right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I just kind of mouth off, and I just want to create a safe space for people who need to deconstruct this stuff and don't know how to start. So that's all I'm doing. I won't write a book. I won't take money for anything I do, because I don't want that conflict of interest, because I've seen what that does to people getting money from
I guess you
their
have personal experience with that.
Yeah. Totally.
So you're calling what you do a ministry, though? Is that
No.
Just kidding.
I'm not. A couple people have told me that it's acted like that for them. That's fine, but I'm not going around saying anything like that. Yeah, but I mean, you guys, I think that what you guys are doing is really, cathartic for a lot of people. So this actually seems like a ministry in its own right. Maybe.
Hey, maybe Liberty is. Maybe they can accept their role in this as pushing me into the ministry. Then.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath, right?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, Stephanie, thanks so much, and I guess everyone, we will see you next time.